Recording in progress.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about React related hooks, how to handle them. So, what we discussed, how to create custom hooks and what are the rules about hooks. We discussed about that. So, in React hooks, we have, as I already told you, there is another concept, life cycle hooks. These are different. Life cycle hooks are different, React hooks are different. So what is the difference you will see when you learn classes also? These hooks are only for which type of components? We can use only for function components. React hooks are used only for function components. We cannot use them in class components. Another important, as we learned, hook is a service. Service use Service uses singleton pattern. It uses a dependency injection mechanism. And what are the components of dependency injection? So we have provider, we have a consumer, and we have an injector. Provider, consumer, injector are the members of dependency injection. What are the features of dependency injection? Reusability, extensibility, maintainability, testability. These all we can achieve by using what? Dependency injection. Enabling dependency injection will allow reusability, maintainability, testability, and all. So, next important. So, we discussed about how to create custom hooks, how we can create the hooks, and for that, we learned about rules. So, hook rules we learned, the basic rules of hook. So, hook rules are nothing but so how do you design a hook? How you access the hook? What are the limitations about hook? So, as we discussed, hook cannot be void. It must return some value, some functionality it should return. And hook cannot be used inside functions. Hook can be used at only higher level. So, these hooks are custom. We created our own hooks here. Now, next important here, this is MFD is not there, right? In which component it is login component, login JS. We don't have this MFD. Okay. So we learned how to define the custom hooks, creating our own hooks. Now we will see some React built-in hooks. So what are the React built-in hooks and how to use them? So React built-in hooks. So What is the concept of this? Already we know that React community provides some hooks which you can use them. So many are there. One we already learned about use state. Use state is a hook. So what is the purpose of use state? So use state, it configures, it configures a local state. Local state. It configures a local state. And what is the nature of this state? What is the nature of this local state? Local state means it allocates memory for the component and it is accessible and available only to that component. It is available only to that component. That means, for example, we have some login component and we or some say home component. We have some home component and we allocated a state here. We are allocating a state for the home component. Now we have another component. This component is suppose login component. We are accessing this login inside the home component. Inside the home component, we are accessing the login. Now this state is not accessible to this component. It is not accessible to this login component. Even if it is running inside that component, it is not accessible to that. That means the state that you declared for a component is available only for the component. It is available only for that component. It is not accessible to others. Not only that, later we will learn about navigation. We will learn a concept called routing and we will learn how to navigate from one component to another. Suppose later from home component, we are navigating to another component. Another component is like contact component. Now here also you have some state. Now this state is not accessible to contact. And this state is not accessible to anybody else. That means the state that you configured for a component by using use state is accessible only to that component. What is the lifespan? Lifespan is from the time the component created till the time the component is destroyed. When a component is destroyed, you will learn. We will discuss about a component life cycle. You will understand about that. So usually the state that you configure using use state is called as local state. In that we can store a value and this state value is not accessible to any other component inside the component or outside the component. It is only for that component. That is the nature of use state. So it configures a local state. What is the point about local state? Local state is defined for current component. So it is accessible only to the current component. It is accessible only to the current component. So it is created It is created when component is requested. It is created when component is requested. It is destroyed when component changes. It is destroyed when component changes. Component changes means you navigate from one component to another. When you navigate from one component to another, then automatically the state that is configured for the component is destroyed. So that is use state. Already all these days we are using it, but this is little more detail about it. What is the state accessible? How it is accessible? Now, syntax, you know how to define that. A constant, we need a getter and we need a setter, is equal to use state. And here any type of value. You can initialize any. You can define any type of value. Later, you will learn about TypeScript language. When you learn about TypeScript language, then you will understand how this use state is built. Actually, how a variable can handle any type of data. Generally, in many programming languages, we define data type integer A. But in a JavaScript based environment, we don't mention any data type. Then how it identifies the data type? When it will identify the data type? Usually data type is identified according to the value you assign. You initialize some value, you assign some value, then the data type will be determined. If a variable is determining the data type according to the value that you assigned or initialized, then these types are known as that means data type is not known. Data type is determined according to the value that you are using at runtime. You pass some value runtime, it will use that value. What is this type known as? A type which can handle any type of data at runtime, it recognizes the data type. We generally call them as dynamic types. We call them as dynamic types. Many programming languages have introduced these dynamic types. Earlier, they were not having. With the latest versions of their languages, they are also dealing with dynamic types. Earlier, they don't have. Dynamic type means the data type will be determined dynamically at the runtime. According to the value that you pass, it will be determined. So this use state is a dynamic type. Actually, to create such dynamic types, we need a concept called generics. Later in TypeScript, you will learn about that. So React library is completely built with generic. So this use state is actually generic type. Generic type means this you should know at experience level. At general level, nobody will ask you what is the type of use state, right? So they will just ask what kind of value it can handle. But at experience level, they may ask you like how use state can handle any type. How use state can handle any type. At experience level, they may ask this. And the answer for experienced people on this point is because use state is a generic type. And what is generic type means actually, you later you will learn in TypeScript. I will write a function. This is use state because hooks are functions, right? And it is a generic type. And the value that you define inside it, that means data, it is of that generic type. What does it means is when you access use state into this type, you pass a number, then automatically data will become a number. Data will become a number. And you access use state later, into that you pass a string. Automatically data becomes what type string. That means the data type determines on what value you are initializing, what value you are assigning. So use state. So you defined like a string array. That means now the data becomes a string array. That's how generally it is determined. This is how use state is built actually. That means this is known to the people who are working at library level. That means in our projects, we have two types of people. One developer, another architect. What is the job of architects is they build the library that is required for your project. And what is developer job is implement the library and build the app. You are using a library and you are building an app. Who built that library? There is another expert team who build the library that is needed for your project. Sometimes you are involved in both. You will build the library and implement it. Sometimes we have a separate team which builds the library and provides us. We need to just inject it and use it. So developer's job is using the libraries and build an app. And architect job is designing the libraries for the application. That's usually how we do. So technically, this is how we manage the use state. You see here, actually, where is use state? Yeah. I will right click and go to definition. When you right click and go to definition on use state, you can see use state is a generic one. Use state is a function and it is a generic type. It is a generic type. So hooks are functions actually. Hooks are functions. And later you will learn how to create such generic types and how to use the generics type. And how it is built, what it is using, so much is behind it. But actually use state, this is the definition of use state, how it will initialize, how we can handle, so many things will be there. Actually, the React library is completely built in TS, TypeScript. So we can see that library actually. That means we can see the library, we can know the behavior. That means, see, you are a developer, you are learning about a hook, and what you will learn about a hook is maximum in every project, what it does, that you will learn. But sometimes in some projects, we need some additional work, which that hook can do. But in general, nobody knows about it regularly. and nobody uses it regularly. Then what developer have to do? Developer have to go into the definition. He need to see is that facility available for it. If it is available, how to use it. Everything is provided as a help. Developers need to go to the definition, understand the complete infrastructure of it, identify which property for which purpose is used. For that, they need to understand the library by seeing the library. So at experience expert level, they do this. They need this because remember, whatever you are learning for a technology is not only the content that technology have. It is having so many things which you don't know. Later, when you get into the situation, so then you have to explore and use it. So that is the reason even people learned React 4 years back, 5 years back. From 4 5 years, they are already working as React developers in our companies, different companies. Even today, some people ping us and ask, Sir, in my recent project, I have this issue, how to resolve it. Already he worked on 2 3 React projects. Then he will have a new doubt because in all those 2 3 projects, he never used it. He never used that concept. Now, some new project, he is exploring it. He need to do it. Then he is not getting an idea. Then he will look about it. He will understand about it and try to implement it. Such options you will encounter in different situations. That's the reason later when you learn TypeScript like language, you will understand how these are built. They are constructed, designed and all, right? Initially, what is the, if anyone asks, anyone ask like how use state can handle any type data. So what is the answer for this? It is a generic type. It is a generic type function. It is a generic type function. So what is the ability of generic? Generic types are type safe. We call them as type safe and dynamically typed. That is the point actually. They are type safe and dynamically typed. So how to configure and use this use state? Examples no need to give because already in every example we used it. Just we need to understand the basic. So that is syntactically, if you want a simple concept, I will give. So use state is a generic type. So that means these parameters. So this is the type of that value. That's just basic syntax here. So whenever you access a generic function, you tell what type to handle, automatically it will use that function. Okay, so what is the limitation of use state? The limitation of use state is you can configure in a function. So you in a component and you can use only for the component. If a child component wants the data, then you cannot use that state directly. What we have to do, we need to pass the data by using what? Properties. We learned controlled and uncontrolled. Through controlled, we have to pass. But directly the state, of parent is not available to child, or any another component also it's not available. For that, we have another hook called use context. We have another hook, use context. So use context. Actually, these terms are very common across all technologies. It's not just only React. In React, we are using in the form of hooks, right? So in other locations, they have different objects. That means Java, .NET, and other technologies, web related, who are building application for web, they also have to use state. State is mandatory for every web application because HTTP is a stateless. But all concepts are almost same. State is same everywhere. But here we are using hooks. In other technologies, they use objects. That means to maintain state, to use the state, they have objects. They call them server side objects, client side objects. By using those objects, we can maintain the state, maintain the state. Context memory is very common in web development. What is context is, context refers to context memory. Context memory means what actually? So here, suppose we are having some server. So we are having some server. So this is some web server. Web server. So actually, we have two pages. Let's say we have two pages here, page 1, and we have page 2. Now, what happens in general? In general, you requested page 1. When you requested page 1, what server will do is, server will allocate memory. Server is going to allocate memory. This server will allocate the memory. So this memory will be for page 1. Server will allocate the memory for page 1 and it will load it. That means memory allocated for page 1. Okay, now you are navigating from page 1 to page 2. Then what happens is, the memory allocated for page 1, it is destroyed. It is destroyed. And it will allocate a new memory again. For whom? It will allocate a new memory for whom? It allocate a new memory for page 2. That is the reason page 2 is unable to know anything about what happened in page 1. It's not possible. In web, it is not possible. HTTP uses this mechanism. So that means HTTP is in state already explained. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Stateless protocol, it cannot remember information between pages. It will load the page, allocate the memory, and after the page completed, it will destroy the memory. Stateless nature is good for server because memory is well maintained. It will destroy the memory after using it. But it is difficult for users because we need to remember information between pages. Between pages. Now, what is the concept is how to remember information between pages. There are so many techniques you will learn. One technique is use state, but it is not between pages. Use state is only for that page. Now what happens is, every web application have a context memory. That is nothing but you allocated memory for page 1. When you allocated memory for page 1, the page 1 memory, page 1 will have a memory This is context memory. Now what we are doing is, we are loading page 2 in page 1. Means we are not navigating outside. We are not moving from page 1 to page 2. What we are doing is we are accessing page 2 in page 1. That means we are not moving out. We are bringing another page and viewing in page 1. It's possible. You might have learnt Ajax. You might have learnt iframes like concept. You can bring another page and display in the current page. You can use a page in page. Through Ajax calls, you can do that. You are already aware of that. Through Ajax, you can bring a page and you can load the page inside the current page. That means now if the page 2 is loaded, page 2 also have its own context memory. That means page 2 is also having its own context memory. That means the context memory is available for page 2. That means memory is allocated for page 2, and page 2 is also having its own context memory. It is having its own context memory. Every page have its context memory. What is the speciality of this memory is, this memory is accessible to anywhere in page 1. It is accessible to page 2 also. That means if any page is running within the context of the current page, that page also can access that memory. Now tell me, is context memory of page 2 is accessible to page 1? It's not accessible. It is accessible to page 3, which is running in page 2. It is accessible to page 3, which is running in page 2. But it is not accessible to page 1. Suppose page 2, page 3, both are running in page 1. Both can access the context of page 1. At any level of hierarchy, you can access. That is what generally in JavaScript, you call this mechanism as. That means outer members are accessible to inner. Inner members are not accessible to outer. You call this mechanism as. You call this mechanism as closure. No? You call this mechanism as a closure. In JavaScript, we have closure. That means the members of outer are accessible to inner, but the inner members are not accessible to outer. This is a closure mechanism. So context memory is not by default created. Actually, some technologies, server-side technologies, they create a context memory inbuilt. They create a context memory, just you have to use it. You have to use it. So means technologies like Java, .NET, all these technologies, server side, they automatically create a context memory for page. They automatically create a context memory for page. Internally, they create. What you have to do is just use it. But here in React, it is not created until or unless you want it. That means context memory is not created for a component internally. You have to explicitly create the context memory, and if you want, you can use the memory. So context memory is not created. You have to create it. This use context is not to create context. It is to use context. How you can use a context without creating a context? There is no context created at all. So in order to use context, first you have to create context. If you can create context, then you can access the context memory and you can use that memory. So use context is for using a context memory if it is created for your component. If it is created for your component. So if it is not created for your component, then you cannot use this. Use context is for using a context memory, but you have to create a context memory for. For creating context memory, you have the methods. We need to know this. So what is use context? Context refers to memory. Context refers to memory. So context memory is created for current component. Context memory is created for current component. Context memory is created for current component. Is created for component, and it is made available to other components that run within the context of current component. Context memory is created for current component, and it is made available to other components that run within the context of current component. Within the context of current component. So this is important. And remember this context memory, how to create. So context memory is created by using create context method. By using the method create context. Context memory is created by using the method create context. That means we have to create context name is equal to create context and null. What does this null is? Nothing but it is expecting a value dynamically. In the memory, there is no value. So why it is configured as null? Because the values are dynamically supplied into this memory. So you created the context. After creating the context, any component can use this context. Any component can use the context. But remember, so here, when you are using this, let's say, suppose this is the point. Okay, page 1. So we have memory allocated. When we allocated the memory, usually this memory is for page 1. That means the page 1 is loaded, the memory allocated for the page 1. And this page 1 is having a context memory. It is having a context memory. After that, after it is having the context memory, we have to create that. After that, we have to mention a context scope. We have to mention a context scope. Generally, what happens? We have page 2 and we have page 3. Now, actually, this is the context scope. So we have a context scope here. Now what happens is the page 2 is working in the context scope, is loaded in that context scope. And the page 3 is loaded outside the context scope. It is in page 1 only. That means both pages are in page 1. But in page 1, there is a scope of context also. That means from where to where the context memory should be available. We can define the limit. When you define the limit, page 3 is running outside the scope of context. It can run. Now, this context memory that you created is accessible only to page 2. It is not accessible to page 3. It is not available. That means if anybody asks, like, if any component runs inside another component, can it use the context? No, it can use the context only when it is inside the context scope. Inside the context scope. Every component which is inside another component cannot use context. It must be inside the context scope, then only it will work. And who will create this context scope? Who is going to create this context scope? That means the context scope where it will load the data and make the data available to other. This creating the context scope is done by a provider. It is done by a provider. What is the job of provider? Yesterday we learned. What is the job of provider? Provider looks for data in memory. It looks for the data in memory. So provider looks for the data in the context memory, and it will verify whether your component is in that memory. And if your component is in that memory, then it will provide the data to that component. Otherwise, it is not accessible. So that means it is context memory is in such a way that it is not accessible to everyone. It is accessible only to the scope. So here what we have to do after creating the context. So you need to configure the context scope. So here, how to need to define the context scope? Context name dot provider. We have to use that provider. And context name dot provider. And here, the components. We have to put the components here. Now, components that are defined inside context scope. Components that are defined inside context scope can use context. Components outside context scope cannot use the context. So we have to create, first step, what we have to do, we have to create a context memory. After creating the context memory, we have to mention the scope from where to where it should work. So we have to define the scope and make sure that the other components are running within the scope. Other components are running within that scope. Right. Now, this context provider, actually, so provider provider locates value in memory and injects into components, locates value into memory and injects into components by using the injector, and that injector is use context. The injector is use context. That means what the context name dot provider, it will use a value. It will use a value. And any component, so which is running inside that context provider, so that means this component can use that value. Can use that value. And how it can use the value? So how it is going to use the value? By using which one? Use context. Use context. That means this use context will be used inside this component. So remember, here we don't pass any properties. We don't pass any properties. That means here one more general doubt will come. We can pass data from one component to another by using properties, right? Then why you need use context? That you can do only if the component is a controlled. If it is not a controlled component, then how you will pass? Only controlled components have parameters. You can pass the values and you can do that. Every component is not a controlled component. It is, some components are individually used. Some components are individually used and they are used as a part of another component. That means what you are doing, you want a login screen. How you can use login screen? You can bring the login into the main page and from there you can log in, or you can redirect directly to login screen only and from there you can log in. From home page you can log in, or you can go to a separate login screen and there you can log in. That means a component should be independently working. It should be working inside the component. Then you cannot design it as a controlled component. Controlled component means it is always controlled by whom? Parent. Always controlled by parent, but individually it should work. In that case, you cannot use parameters and you cannot use properties for uncontrolled components. And if an uncontrolled component is being used in another component, then we need to transport data by using state, which is context. It is not through properties. Properties are possible only if it is a controlled component, otherwise not possible. So you have to follow this. That means what component have to do? That means inside the component, that means we have a function component. And what this component will do? This component is going to use state. That means context is equal to use context and the context name. That means what will happen? What will happen is, so whatever the data you defined inside the context, that data it will inject into this component. And you can access and use from anywhere. You can access and use here. So that is, and here An important note is context memory can use any type of data. It is dynamic type. That's the point. So it is dynamically typed, how we can manage the dynamically typed data. Let's see one example for this. That means how we can access the data from one component to another. So let's create a simple, means just I will create one file first. Because we haven't learned any routing. Routing means navigation. Later we will learn. When we learn navigation, we can create a complete navigation from one component to another. We can dynamically bring one component and show it here. That you will see next level, how to create such navigation. So here, as of now, so say context demo. I will just put a context demo .jsx. Let's write the function. So export function context demo. And here the context demo. So we will use first I will here I will put some options. What are the options is, so we create a function. Here itself we are creating multiple, because as I told you, we will later learn routing. We can bring a component and use it here dynamically. As of now, we are creating a export. So function, this is level 1 component. Okay, level 1 component we created, and it will return. So it will return a simple markup. This is heading is level 1 component. This is level 1 component. We are creating another one. So level 2 component. So level 1, level 2 components are there. And here they will return. So in this return, so we are using class container fluid. So padding 4, and so here BG dark and the text white. Okay. Now context demo I will access first. In index.js, I am keeping context demo. Context demo. So here context demo is coming. So here I will keep a heading as context demo. Okay, this is context demo. Now what we are doing is, here we have class name BG warning padding 4. Okay. Now margin to 3, something like this. Now what we want to do is, so text danger. Okay. We want to access that level 1 component inside this context demo. Here we will use level 1 component. That means level 1 component is accessed here. So we are using level 2 I given. This is level 2. Okay. And this is level 1. Okay. I will copy this here, right? So level 1 component is having this. Now inside level 1 component, I am using level 2 component. Inside level 1, level 2. That means here I will just change some BG danger and I say text white. Like this we are adding. That means inside level 1, level 2 is used. That means context demo is the main in that level 1 and level 2 is in level 1. Now what we need is we want data. So we want here data. We want data here. This data must be accessible to level 1 and it should be accessible to level 2 also. Components working at any level, they must able to access the data. Actually, level 1 context can be accessed to level 2. Level 2. But here in React, context memory is such a way that it can access that it can provide data to components running at any level. I told you page 3 can access page 2. But here it's not like that. The context memory allocated can be accessed at any level. At any level. Inside the component at any level hierarchy, it is working, it can access. Just like I told you closure. Closure means what? A function is inside function. Inside the function, there is another function. There can be several functions. The variable declared in the parent function is accessible to all of them. Is accessible to all of them. All inner functions can access. That is the nature of context. So context is about, remember, context is about parent to child, not child to parent. Child to parent, other techniques we have to use. Initially, it is parent to child at any level. That means now what we have to do, we have to create a context. That context should have a scope. In that scope, these two should be running. In that scope, these two should be running. Then they can access the data and use the data. So what we have to do, we have to create a context. At the top, I am creating a context. For that, first you have to import. You have to import create context from React. And globally, we have to create. Suppose I am creating user context. So user context, that is the name. And how to create context, and the context default value is null. Okay, after creating the context, so this context, this is the context demo. That means what is the scope? You have to define the scope. That means here we will define the context scope. How to define the context scope? We have to use user context dot provider. User context dot provider. So, and inside that you have to put this one. That means remember, now level 1 component is inside the provider, means inside the context scope. And the level 2 is in level 1. So automatically it is in the scope. It is in the scope on, because level 1 is in the scope and level 2 is in level 1. That means both are in the scope. If level 2 is outside the scope, it cannot access. It cannot access. So now this provider needs a value. That means you can configure a value. Value can be any type. Any type means string, number, array, any kind of value. You can pass any type of value. You can pass an object. You can pass an array, any kind of value. As of now, I am just passing a string. String is some username. John is the username. Now what we are doing is, so we are configuring the value. Okay. I want to access that in level 1. The value of this, I want to access in level 1. Actually, every component, what it will have? every component will have constant. So it will have username. So, and what? Set username is equal to use state. Use state is some John. Everyone have their local memory. In addition to the local memory, they have a context memory because local memory is not accessible to others. So now what we will do, we can send that username here. That means, user name. We will send that value here. That means from the local memory, we are sending value to the context memory. So that context memory is accessible to everyone. So who can access this context memory? This context memory can be accessed by level 1. So what we will do here I will put the username. That means main component can use the username because it is in local state. It is in local state, it can use it. How level 1 can use it? So what we have to do, go to level 1. In level 1, we have to create a context is equal to what? Use context. Here we have to inject. Use context is an injector. Which context you have to use? Context name. Context name is what? User context. That means whatever the data provided by this context is now accessible through this reference. Is accessible through this reference. That means now what we will do here, we are just using that context. Because it is a string type, you can directly access. If it is an object type, then dot key. If it is an array type, then you map depending on what type of data is coming. That means now that John is accessible to level 1. That John is not present in level 1. It is accessible to level 1. We can access to level 1. Now level 2 also can access it. That means what you can do, you go to level 2 component. In level 2 component, again, you create a context. Use context. Which context? User context you use. You can create any number of contexts. It's not like only one context. There can be multiple contexts. It is not just only one context memory. You can have multiple, but not recommended. That is not good coding. You generally use only one context. In that we can define multiple values. Multiple values. So here, this can be used here again. That means level 2 also is using what? The context. Level 2 is also using it. That means the data of parent component is accessible to the childs. At any level of hierarchy, they can access. This is not possible if you keep it in a state. Not possible if you keep it in a state. So through state, you have to pass to context. Through context, we can access. We can access. And see here, I'm just hard coding some value. Suppose what we will do in context demo. Suppose what we are doing in context demo, we are creating. So we are creating a function handle name change. And what we will do, we will collect an event argument and we will set name. Set username. Set username is e dot target dot value. So, and here I will not initialize anything. And what we will do, we will put some. So we will put some text box. So class name as my2 or 3. And here we will put a text box. Input type is text. And here we will put user name placeholder. Placeholder we say user name. And here on change. On change is what? Handle name change. That means this time what we are doing is we are not having the value. You see, all three components are there. You click inside this and type something, then automatically it is accessible everywhere. We are transporting data from one component to another. And remember, these level 1, level 2 are uncontrolled components. They are uncontrolled components. If they are controlled components, we can pass the parameters. We don't need a context. If they are controlled components without a context, we already done that. but now they are controlled components or uncontrolled. They are uncontrolled. In uncontrolled, there is no chance of passing any parameter. Then how you transport data from parent to child? That is possible by using what? Context. So in the context, it is possible. So this is the concept of a context memory. Use state is a local memory. Use context is a context memory. But here, if you are moving from one component to another completely, you are changing from one component to another, context is not available. Context is no longer available. Context is available only for components that run inside the current component. If you are moving outside, you go to another component, it's not available. You want some data across all components, even they are not inside, you want across all components, then we have to use another memory. Generally, that memory is at application level. Then for that, we need another memory that is created by using another concept called use reducer. Use reducer. It's a huge concept. Later, I will show you this point. First example here. Example is what? Context demo dot what? JSX. In context demo JSX, let me copy this. This is the example of context demo. Means how you can configure and access the data from one component to another, right? Now, if you want the data across components, there are so many techniques. And in that one, another important technique is what we have to learn about use reducer. Use reducer is a big concept, very big concept. It's a, at higher level, people use a concept called redux at higher level. At a medium small scale level, use reducer is enough. At a higher level, we need a redux. And this is very major actually. So what is this? We will see in next session, right? So Monday we will see that. This is enough for today. So Monday we will see about reducer. It will take entire session to understand this reducer. It's a very big concept. So it's a very big concept and very important. So we will discuss about this in next session. So Monday, we will discuss about what is reducer and how reducer works. Okay, right.